So we'll be taking this presentation into two parts. First part, we'll be talking about multi-screening, and the second part will be talking about our VOD platform as a case study with Abim here. And so multi-screening, I mean, this has been the trend recently. I mean, two buzzwords this year for agencies and the media industry. One is branded content, and the other one is multi-screening. So what's multi-screening and how does it work and how did it start? So today the user is using different devices and while he's watching TV, and he's researching so many things, and he's looking to find more information about whatever he's watching. So the more available touch points that are there, the better it is for him and for the publisher. So looking at how people today consume content. So TV is there, and TV is going to be, and as it is today, the king. So what's in for digital media here? So today, user starts to consume content on various platforms, on his mobile device, on his laptop, maybe gaming console, and smart TV. But what's initiates that is TV at the beginning. So TV drives all of this. And talking about the content being available everywhere, that's the main thing. I mean, today the king is TV, and the king also is the premium content. So today, there are so many devices around every single user. So there are tablets, mobile, and laptops, right? So the way that we think that as NBC Group, that our consumer is not just in front of TV, he's everywhere. There's a chance that we could meet him at every single touch point of these. So today, looking at interactions on media. So previously, there was a lot of print. And today, as we go, everything is moving digital. So even print is now moving digital. So what can we do as NBC to just answer the needs of our consumers? I'll be talking a little bit about Arab Idol in a minute, but I first would like to talk about this. So TV is king, and people are saying TV might die in the future. It's basically not going to die. It's basically going to transform into different shapes. So people will be consuming TV through VOD channels. They'll be consuming TV through social media. They'll be consuming TV through any existing connected device. So, and that's why we are keen on building digital products now at NBC Group. We have built Shahid, we're building second screen devices, we're extending our shows into social media platforms, into mobile devices, and we're giving the consumers the chances to access TV from wherever they want, whenever they want. And I mean, Idol is basically a great example. So previously, the only metric that we used to look at when we were watching TV is ratings. So ratings is the way that, basically is the currency that we use. And today there are so many metrics out there. So looking at how people consume TV today, you'll see that it's a huge, tremendous reach that is happening as well on digital platforms. Websites reaching to millions and millions and page views, video channels reaching to hundreds of millions of media views. And that's something that no one has predicted. I mean, we were always talking about how the future of TV will be, but now it's forming and it's shaping. So multi-screening is there. I mean, it's the natural behavior of any human. I mean, people multitask, and they have multiple devices to use while they're multitasking. So we made sure that wherever you are, you have an access to TV. So whether you're watching on TV, you have your second screen, you can chat, you can access, join a conversation, interact with the show, interact with presenters, interact with whoever the star that you'd love to follow. So we have been going into this direction for the past 2 years. So we're moving toward more and more digital products and more touch points for TV. And what's in for advertisers? So today we're saying there is these multi-platforms. There are these keeping the same audience, of course, with different target segments. So the segments that are watching TV are not exactly the ones that are on digital. Some of them maybe, but not all of them. So if you have a campaign that you'd like to run to target your audience, TV gives you the reach, but doesn't give you other things. It doesn't give you engagement, doesn't give you the exact goal of that, which is interacting with your brand. So this is what digital media comes in and delivers within the same environment. And also looking at the figures that we've been getting, previously digital was a very difficult thing to measure reach on it. And it's a very small reach, taking into consideration population versus online penetration. But today, looking at the kind of figures that we see with people interacting with our shows on the internet, it's huge. And that is reach, whether it's incremental or complementary, but there is a reach that is increasing every day on digital platforms. But looking at this, I mean, the industry is not yet fully understanding how this works. I mean, looking at how we should plan this. How do we do a multi-screen campaign, or how do we do an integrated campaign? I think agencies also need to take into consideration how this works, how their company is structured today, because still a lot of agencies have a very separate approach to planning. Offline, online, separate plans, separate budgets, etc. So, but they need to look more into this, because this is the future. Tomorrow, your campaign is not just going to be on one platform, because it's not going to work, basically. You're not going to get the results that you want. So you need to actually take into consideration how this will work accumulatively with all the platforms. And in order to do that, you need to work very closely with publishers. You need to look into how the work is structured. We're always talking about traditional media and how it gets most of the money. And today we're moving toward digital, where traditional media is losing every day. So how do we take that into our system? How do we absorb it? How do we integrate our teams is a big question for agencies. And at the same time, understanding how this works. I mean, every day there's a new digital platform. There is a new, I'm sure everyone heard of Geek, which is now the buzzword or the new platform for video sharing. Every day there will be a new platform coming up. How do you utilize that? How do you integrate it into your brand? How do you associate yourself with a brand that is extended on all of these platforms? And that's the big question here. And I'll leave it for the advertisers and agencies to answer, basically. And now I'll leave you with a video about Shahad, our platform, and then Abim will be taking this further to talk about Shahad as a case study as a second screen.
أزعجتني.
أنا بفرح لما أزعجك.
Hello, everybody. First and foremost, I have to confess, I love my job, okay? My background, I used to work in television for quite a long time. I worked at Sky Television, ITV in the UK. And there was this day when you had to bring your children in, you know, when you bring your kids in to show them that daddy actually goes to work. Now, I had these two young boys, and from that day on, I was their biggest hero. Does anybody want to guess why? because they went back to school and they told their friends that their daddy watches television all day. That's all he does, and he gets paid for it. Now, my mother is yet to forgive me because, my Nigerian background, you either had to be a doctor or an engineer, and somewhere between starting on my PhD, I gave up and I ended up working in television. So right about now, she's beginning to forgive me. I guess because I live in Dubai and she can come and live over here. Now, why am I saying all this? Because whenever I talk to people, or when people talk to me about television, or my colleagues who work in digital, they get very excited about this whole digital technology. One of the things that absolutely makes me very upset is when people say things like, oh, my children don't watch television anymore, they watch YouTube. Or people say, when you go to agencies, they say things like, well, it's very difficult for us these days because when you go to talk to a client will say to you, well, people are not watching television much. They're watching it, they're on the internet. But if we stop and ask, what are people actually doing on the internet? My next few slides, I'm going to talk to you, first of all, about the context of, where television is, how digital comes into it, and then the real nub of the matter, multi-screening, what is actually happening. Let's take, for example, television. Very simple chart, okay? NBC television reaches, in an average week, 92% of satellite households in Saudi. That's a fact. At the same time, we're seeing that, this thing called the internet, again, people say it's going to be very big, half the population in the Middle East, if you look at some figures, I've got very conservative figures here, 40%, I'll say, of the Middle East is now online. A lot of that is driven by mobile internet connections and by, the youth population and people's thirst for video. In different markets in the Middle East, this penetration is much bigger. In the UAE, for instance, where we are, it's 71%. Now, why am I saying this? Because you have to stop and ask yourself, where is all of this going? There's only so much time in a day that the average user can, dedicate to watching content. Now, if you look at the figures from Ipsos for 2012 versus 2011, the average viewer actually showed an increase in time that they spend watching television by 12 minutes. So that's going up. Television viewing is going up, driven by very good content. At the same time, we all know, anecdotally and also by data, that viewing of video content online is also going up. So at some point, you've got to ask yourself, where's all this going? Now, sorry, that's a pretty bad slide. What that says is that NBC Digital reaches 1 in 3 of the internet users in Saudi. So from the NBC point of view, we embrace this growth in digital because we are seeing that the internet is actually a platform with a return path where viewers can engage with our content. And we are also growing year after year in double-digit figures. In fact, if you look at our video online platform, it grew in triple-digit figures for the last 2 years, outstripping the market growth. So this is where the real hunger is, and this is where we now start talking about multi-screening. Now, multi-screening can happen in several ways. The first way is this. If you go back to this chart, where we're talking about the penetration of television, and you consider that in a Saudi household or even in an Emirati household, where you have, quite large numbers in the household. I think the latest figures from the Emirates is that there are about 8 people or so in a household. So now, if you can think about that in the context of Ramadan and why people watch television, right? We went out and we surveyed 5,000 viewers in Egypt and in Saudi, just asking all kinds of questions, basic of which is why do you watch television? 37% of them said to be close to the family. 43% of them said so as not to miss out on what people are talking about. A whopping 77% of them said there are so many programs out there I don't want to miss them. So now you've got a household of 8 people, Ramadan, TV brings everybody together. Now, is one television screen, is one television stream enough? So an example of the growth of multi-screening addresses that, where you can have several programs on several screens. So you're there with your parents and your siblings, and you're on your iPad, you're watching something else, maybe NBC Action, whilst there's NBC One on the main screen. That's multi-screening. But then what happens to the NBC One program that you're not watching? That's where our video on demand platform comes into it. Now, when you talk about tablets, very, very key. On the second day of Ramadan last year, we launched the Shahid app for iPad. We thought we'd ride this whole phenomenon. Now, in the first couple of weeks, it went straight to the top of the charts in the Middle East. And we estimate, using our figures and research from other people like Effective Measure, for instance, we estimate that the Shahid app for iPad has been downloaded by more than 60% of iPad owners in MENA who are likely to download an entertainment app. That is pretty huge. But it's not groundbreaking, because if you look at all the markets, for instance, the BBC iPlayer, that's the #1 free app in the Apple Store. So when you talk about these kinds of things, certain human behaviors are transferable across markets. So again, just to go back, television content, catch up television content, want to see something else, still want to be with your friends and your family. This is where multi-screening is actually coming into its own. So again, and these are all no-brainers, but just to put some context, we then go and say, right, we're putting all this money into programs like other broadcasters in Ramadan. Why do you choose to use Shahid whilst NBC is broadcasting all of this? And these are all some of the top reasons that people give. It's not exclusive to NBC, but what NBC is doing is understanding that TV is not dead, the internet isn't going to take over television. People want to catch proper content across whatever platform they want to. And that's why we have a platform as a true example of multi-screening in the Middle East. Now, who are these people who actually use the Shahid platform? Now, there are people like you and me, probably younger than me, well, definitely younger than me, and they actually do hit the sweet spot for the advertiser, because if you look at the figures of people who are online on a regular basis, the profile tends to skew very, very heavily towards males. Now, in this particular instance, again, this is where you have to have the mindset that it is television viewing over an internet platform. And that's why this profile of 53 females to 47 males very much mirrors the profile of our programs. And when you talk about the mindsets in terms of why they do it, it's very similar to television mindsets. They watch at home, no real-time preference. It's about convenience and catching up. Now, this Shahid uses, again, to address the points of no one's watching television, they're all watching on the internet. These Shahid users have several television touch points, not just NBC touch points, but also channels like National Geographic and Al Jazeera. On an average day, 64% of Shahid users use the platform, but they also use other television channels. So you can see most of them are on Shahid on an average day, but they also go on NBC One, they also go on NBC Two. Just a small caveat. Now, these percentages tend to change depending on what programs we have on NBC. This chart refers to a period in time when we had Arabs Got Talent and Fatima. So in this instance, you see NBC4 also sort of vying with NBC1. Okay? So here's a key question. You're a Shahid user, you come there every day. It's your space. What do you do? How do you consume Shahid as well as television? It's a key question for advertisers, because they say to us, are we paying for the same person twice over? Well, yes and no. And there's no wrong answer. There's no bad thing about that. 44% of the regular users of the Shahid platform, right, on an average day, when you ask them, how often do you come to this website, how often do you go to these channels? If you look at their figures, 44% of them get their NBC content on television only. So even though they're Shahid visitors, On some days, they get 44% of their NBC content on our channels only. But then that number will increase to 76% if you take their actual Shahid viewing into consideration. And that's a key consideration for advertisers. There's always a glitch. Okay, going back, still going on to address how people use the platform. And this is a true example of multi-screening. Okay, this is not replacement viewing. You will see from the chart. Now, the Shahid line is the red one, and NBC television is the blue one. I must say that these are different scales, just for illustrative purposes. Okay, television way outranks in terms of actual numbers. But the interesting thing is the pattern. This is not exclusive to NBC either. If you look at the numbers for catch-up VOD platforms, it is the same pattern. So what are people doing? They're actually viewing television on their laptops, on their tablets, using Shahid to just slightly shift prime time. So that's interesting, but not as interesting as this. This behavior actually becomes even more intense when you look at high concentrated viewing periods like Ramadan. This is when everybody, all the broadcasters, everybody, I don't have to tell you, it's a big television viewing period. And what happens at this time, with all this content around the place, is that we'll see that Shahid actually extends prime time. And if we look behind these figures, we see that this is due in very large part to an influx of young men and a high concentration of visits from tablets and mobile devices. There's no other example as clear-cut as this as multi-screening in action. For the advertisers, and this is some work that we did recently, and we're breaking this here for the first time. We did this with a couple of agencies to help them to understand the relative value of advertising on television only, advertising on television and NBC properties, or advertising on digital only. Now, it's no surprise. For a 4-week campaign for an FMCG brand, television, amongst people who saw, sorry, let me start again. So television had a 71% reach for the campaign. The people who saw the campaign on both television and on NBC digital properties had a 22% reach, sorry, 49% reach for television, 22% for those who saw TV and online Shahid had 8%. So if you look at it in terms of the complementary reach, 49% of the sample saw the campaign on TV only. 22% of the sample saw it on TV and online, and 8% saw it only online. Behind that, if you then go and see what the value of that was, you will see that the real value is among the multi-screeners. People who saw the campaign on both television and online. And again, when you're talking about multi-screening, just to go back over what myself and Ahmed have talked about, it's on the increase. It depends on the content that people want to watch, the devices that are going to use to watch it. You have platforms like Shahid, which actually give multi-screeners the real environment in which they can do this, and also advertisers as well. It's a short presentation. If you have any questions, please do ask them. There's lots of data that goes behind this, and I'll be happy to share that with you guys. Thank you for your attention.